So I just want to start off and get right into it. I'll tell you a little bit more about me as we go through the presentation for anyone who cares and wants to know. But I have a question for all of you that are attending right now. And I stole this question. I'll give the person credit here in a minute. But I have a question for you because I understand most of you are project managers, leaders, in some way, either leaders of people or influencers of people. So I have a question, and the question is to come up, I think. There we go. Are you 100% completely, totally comfortable with calling yourself a leader? And I ask people this because everyone's a leader in some way. I was just watching the news this morning, and there's an 8-year-old kid who he delivers brown bag gloves and coats and blankets in a brown bag to people, and he's a leader in his community, and he's 8. So we can all lead at something. However, we don't all lead at something because we don't all answer this question affirmatively. And I know that because Drew Dudley asked this question at a conference I was speaking at in Edmonton at the annual conference last year. Only 20 PMPs out of 200 raised their hand to answer that question. And so I've asked it as well to many different audiences since then. And usually around 5 to 10% of the people will raise their hand. Matter of fact, I just asked the question to county officials in the state of Illinois, and just a few more, maybe about 25% of those people raised their hand. And they're elected leaders and officials. So what's going on? I started to ask myself this question. I wanted to know why everybody didn't raise their hand. Well, they didn't because they didn't feel totally and completely comfortable with calling themselves a leader. Well, why didn't they? What were they thinking? And what are you thinking if you didn't raise your hand? Well, even if you did, what are you thinking? Then I thought, what are you thinking with? Because that's really what this is about. Many of you may have heard of Carl Jung. There's Jungian theory out there. He was a Swiss psychotherapist and psychiatrist back in the early 1900s who developed the theory of archetypes. So if any of you have ever taken the DISC profile or personality profiles or Myers-Briggs, the MBTI, if you've ever taken any of those, you've run into his theory. Those are all based on his theory. Anything with like 4 quadrants, those kinds of things, those are all based on Jungian theory. And as he was developing, as he was working, he came to the U.S. and he visited Pueblo, New Mexico in 1925. And there he encountered Chief Mountain Lake. And he was talking to Chief Mountain Lake, and Chief Mountain Lake said this, and this is quoted from his book. It'd be correct in our times, but we'll deal with that, right? Chief Mountain Lake said this. He said, the whites always want something. They're always uneasy and restless. Why? We do not know. We don't know what they want. We don't understand them. We think they are mad. Must have been surprised by that response, and he said, well, what do you mean by that? Why do you think that they're mad? And Chief Mountain Lake said, they say that they think with their head. And Carl said, well, with. And Chief Mountain Lake simply pointed to his chest. He pointed to his heart, and he said they think with their heart. And so we've heard this in the past, this thinking with your heart. And for me, I'm a chemist. I like math. I like physics. I like all that science, nerdy kind of stuff. And so thinking with your heart is a little too like frou-frou, woo-woo kind of stuff for me. You know, I got into IT. You can control things, and we use our heads to think. But gurus and spiritual leaders have been telling us for centuries to think with our hearts. So what does it mean? Because we head thinkers, we believe this is an inferior state of mind. We want to do the rational, logical kinds of things. And the cool thing about head thinking is for several generations now, it has brought us tremendous progress. It has allowed us to raise the standard of living across the world, very much so here in the U.S. where I am, in North America. But we've made tremendous advances. I mean, look at us. How many of us are connected here today? We're not in the same spot. You used to have to be in the same physical location to hear somebody speak or to attend a presentation, and we don't today. You have a computer. Many of you have smartphones in the palm of your hand, and your desktop computer has more power than was on the first spacecraft that went into space. And so head thinking has done tremendous stuff, raised standards of living, like I said, around the world. Here in the U.S., the people that are below what we call the poverty line, that I never dreamed of having, they have computers, they have flat screen TVs in their homes, and yet they live in poverty. This isn't a political thing. I'm not trying to make anybody angry. I'm trying to say, look at what we head thinkers have done, that poorest among us can have some of this stuff because of the advances in technology and manufacturing and all of that good stuff. So head thinking, it's been a good thing. A few slides. To lead the way in this generation and future generations, you must learn to think with your heart and lead with your heart. Some examples, because I really don't want you to just take my word for it. Who am I? After all, I'm here just in Sugar Land, Texas, speaking to you over the phone. You don't even see my face. But John Maxwell, I don't know if any of you know him. He writes a lot of great leadership books. I don't know how many he's written so far, but he continues to put them out. His latest one is called Good Leaders Ask Great Questions. But he wrote a book called The 360-Degree Leader. And I want you to look at his 5 levels of leadership. If you look, the bottom 3 have to do with head thinking. Positions, permissions, production, those all have to do with that. But look at his top 2 levels. They have to do more with the heart, the people, and your own, what he calls personhood. And only one, I don't know if any of you have read the book Management Rewired by Charles Jacobs. And here's what he says. And when I read this, it was a little freaky for me. He says, functional MRI shows that objective reasoning has nothing to do with the way that we solve problems, make decisions, and plan. All right, now how many of you might just roll your eyes when you read that? Because that's exactly what I did. I mean, I'm a good head thinker, right? I was a director of an IT consulting company. I promoted, all this kind of stuff because of my good head thinking. And here he says this, that has nothing to do with the way we solve problems. He says logic is just a way to justify conclusions that we've already reached. That might be because you all know that, where you like beat people up with logic and your own rationale, the way that you see things and the perspectives you take. Well, he goes on to say, this means the more we attempt to strip out feelings, to strip out the heart, right, the more we lose access to what we've learned from our past experiences. In the book to talk a little bit more about that, how we store our past experiences as feelings. And that's why we get these gut feelings, and I can go into that because I love neuroscience, and we can talk about mirror neurons and things like that. But think about that we use logic as a way to justify our answers and conclusions. Now, there are books out there as well. Daniel Pink, who spoke at the PMI Global Congress 2 global congresses ago, he's written a number of different books. He's written A Whole New Mind that has to do more with intrinsic value and heart thinking. He wrote the book Drive. He wrote To Sell is Human. Those are some of his latest stuff. And in all of his research, he talks about what would fall under the heart category. And so a little bit about success. How do we reach that, and what does this heart have to do with anything? Well, think about success.